Before the world knew him as Mahatma, the Great Soul, he was simply Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi, a shy boy born on October 2nd, 1869, in the coastal town of Porbandar, Gujarat. His father, Karamchand Gandhi, was the Diwan, or chief minister, of the small princely state of Porbandar. His mother, Putlibai, was deeply religious, guiding young Mohandas with stories of morality, truth, and devotion. From an early age, Gandhi absorbed the values of Ahimsa, nonviolence, Satya, truth, and Seva, service. Though not a remarkable student, he was quiet, thoughtful, and deeply influenced by his mother's spiritual discipline, fasting, praying, and serving others with humility. Porbandar's simple life, surrounded by temples, the sea, and strong family traditions, shaped the foundation of his character. It was here that the seeds of his lifelong pursuit of truth and moral strength were first planted.
In 1888, at just 18 years old, Mohandas Gandhi set sail for London to study law and become a barrister. It was his first journey away from India and into a world vastly different from the traditions he had known. Arriving in England, Gandhi was fascinated by Western culture, the manners, fashion, and intellectual debates that filled the city. At first, he tried to fit in, even experimenting with English clothes and etiquette. But beneath this curiosity, he remained deeply introspective, struggling to balance his Indian identity with the new world around him. While studying at the Inner Temple, one of London's prestigious law schools, Gandhi was introduced to the works of great thinkers, Henry David Thoreau, Leo Tolstoy, and the Bhagavad Gita in English translation. These writings profoundly shaped his ideas about morality, truth, and resistance through nonviolence. By the time he was called to the bar in 1891, Gandhi had not only earned a law degree, he had begun the inner transformation that would one day make him a moral force for justice across the world.
In 1893, Gandhi traveled to South Africa to work as a legal representative for an Indian merchant. What was meant to be a one-year stay turned into a 21-year journey that would change the course of his life and the destiny of millions. On one fateful night, while traveling by train to Pretoria, Gandhi was forcibly removed from a first-class compartment despite holding a valid ticket. His only fault was the color of his skin. Shivering on a cold station platform in Pietermaritzburg, Gandhi felt humiliation turn into resolve. That moment became the spark that ignited his lifelong fight against injustice. In South Africa, he witnessed the cruel reality of racial segregation and the daily humiliation faced by Indians and Africans alike. Instead of responding with anger, he began to search for a higher way, a moral form of resistance. Through community organization and legal advocacy, Gandhi transformed personal suffering into social awakening. The seeds of Satyagraha, his philosophy of truth and nonviolent resistance, were planted in the soil of South Africa. It was here that the lawyer from India became a leader of conscience.
Gandhi's experiences in South Africa soon pushed him from observer to organizer. Realizing that isolated protests and legal petitions were not enough, he founded the Natal Indian Congress in 1894 to unite the scattered Indian community under one banner. It became the foundation of his political awakening. Through this organization, Gandhi encouraged Indians to demand dignity, fairness, and representation. He trained them to use words instead of weapons, truth instead of hatred. His speeches and letters carried a quiet power that began to unsettle those in authority. When discriminatory laws targeted Indians, forcing them to register, carry passes, and accept inferior rights, Gandhi called for collective, nonviolent resistance. He named this approach Satyagraha, or holding on to truth. It was a radical idea that moral strength could defeat physical force. During these years, Gandhi learned that change came not only from protest, but from discipline, unity, and moral courage. South Africa became his laboratory of resistance, where the young lawyer transformed into a movement builder, testing ideas that would later shake the British Empire itself.
Out of years of struggle and reflection, Gandhi forged one of the most revolutionary ideas in human history, Satyagraha, the power of truth and nonviolent resistance. To Gandhi, this was not merely a political tool, but a way of life, a spiritual path grounded in moral courage and self-discipline. He believed that true strength was not in the fist, but in the heart. Violence, he argued, only bred more hatred, while nonviolence transformed the opponent by appealing to their conscience. An eye for an eye, he said, makes the whole world blind. Satyagraha demanded immense inner strength to face injustice without striking back, to endure suffering without resentment. It called for truthfulness in speech, purity in intent, and love even for one's enemies. Gandhi tested these principles through hunger strikes, civil disobedience, and peaceful marches, proving that the human spirit could stand firm against oppression without shedding a drop of blood. This philosophy would later become the beating heart of global movements for freedom and justice, inspiring Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, and countless others. Satyagraha was Gandhi's greatest gift to humanity, the discovery that moral force could move empires.
When Gandhi returned to India in 1915, after 2 decades in South Africa, he was no longer just a lawyer. He was a seasoned activist with a clear vision of justice through nonviolence. India, under British rule, was restless and divided. Few knew it then, but his return would ignite one of the most powerful freedom movements in human history. Welcomed by his mentor, Gopal Krishna Gokhale, Gandhi began by traveling across the vast land, not as a politician, but as a student of his own country. He visited villages, listened to farmers, and observed the suffering caused by poverty and colonial exploitation. He dressed like the common people, lived simply, and immersed himself in their daily struggles. Soon, his leadership in local causes, like the Champaran and Kheda movements, made him a national figure. Instead of violence or anger, he taught ordinary Indians the strength of truth and discipline, showing that resistance could be both moral and effective. By 1920, Gandhi had become the voice of the voiceless, transforming India's scattered grievances into a united cry for freedom. His philosophy of non-cooperation would soon turn the empire's power against itself and make him not just a leader, but a symbol of India's soul.
In 1917, Gandhi's first great test in India came in a small district called Champaran in Bihar. The local farmers were being forced by British planters to grow indigo instead of food crops, a policy that left them impoverished and hungry. When the peasants pleaded for help, Gandhi arrived not with weapons or soldiers, but with truth and compassion. He listened patiently to their stories, collected testimonies, and confronted the authorities with undeniable evidence of injustice. When ordered to leave the district, he refused, peacefully disobeying British law. It was a bold act of civil disobedience, one that drew national attention. The British eventually yielded, and the farmers' demands were met. Champaran became the first major victory of nonviolent protest in India. A year later, in Kheda, Gujarat, heavy taxes were imposed despite a devastating famine. Gandhi stood beside the farmers again, urging them to remain calm but firm, to refuse payment until the taxes were suspended. The movement stayed disciplined and peaceful despite pressure. Finally, the government gave in. These early struggles were more than just local wins. They were proof that moral courage could defeat imperial power. Champaran and Kheda turned Gandhi into a national hero and marked the dawn of a new kind of revolution, one fought not with violence, but with truth and collective will. By 1920, Gandhi's influence had grown into a tidal wave of national awakening. The non-cooperation movement became his bold call for India to withdraw its consent from British rule, not through violence, but through refusal and unity. He urged Indians to boycott British schools, courts, and offices, to reject foreign goods, and to spin their own cloth, a simple act that became a symbol of independence. The spinning wheel, or charkha, turned into a weapon of peaceful rebellion, representing self-reliance and national pride. Across the country, millions responded. Students left colonial schools, lawyers abandoned British courts, and entire villages began producing their own clothes. For the first time, the British felt the pulse of defiance spreading through every corner of India. But Gandhi's movement was not just political, it was spiritual and moral. He taught that true freedom could not come from hatred or revenge. We must purify ourselves before we purify our nation, he said. Though the movement was eventually suspended after an outbreak of violence in Chauri Chaura, it marked a turning point. The non-cooperation movement united India as never before, showing the world that power could come not from guns, but from collective conscience and peaceful resistance. In 1930, Gandhi launched one of the most iconic acts of peaceful protest in human history, the Salt March. It began as a simple walk, but it would shake an empire. British law had made it illegal for Indians to make or sell their own salt, a basic necessity of life. Gandhi saw this injustice as the perfect symbol of colonial oppression. On March 12, 1930, he set out from his ashram in Sabarmati with 78 followers, walking more than 240 miles toward the Arabian Sea. Day after day, crowds gathered along the dusty roads, drawn by his quiet determination. Villagers left their homes to join him. What began as a small protest grew into a mass movement, with thousands walking beside the Mahatma. After 24 days, Gandhi reached the coast at Dandi. There, before a silent crowd, he bent down, scooped a handful of salt from the shore, and held it up to the sky. That simple act, breaking the law without anger or violence, became a symbol of resistance heard around the world. The British arrested tens of thousands, including Gandhi himself, but the Salt March had already done its work. It awakened India's spirit, showing that moral courage could bring an empire to its knees. After the Salt March, Gandhi's call for civil disobedience swept across India like wildfire. It was no longer a local protest. It became a nationwide awakening. Villages, towns, and cities joined in defying British authority through peaceful, organized resistance. People refused to pay taxes, boycotted British goods, and resigned from government posts. Women took to the streets, spinning khadi, leading marches, and standing shoulder to shoulder with men, something India had never seen before. Students left colonial schools, farmers refused to surrender their crops. Everywhere, silence and discipline replaced chaos. Gandhi's movement was not fueled by anger, but by moral conviction. The British cracked down with arrests, beatings, and brutality. Gandhi himself was imprisoned, but his absence only strengthened the resolve of millions. His message was clear: we will not obey unjust laws. We will suffer, but we will not hate. Civil disobedience transformed India's fight for independence into a spiritual struggle, a battle not just for freedom from foreign rule, but for freedom from fear, injustice, and submission. Gandhi had shown that resistance could be a force of the soul, not of violence.
For Gandhi, prison was never a place of defeat. It was a place of reflection, discipline, and spiritual strength. Between 1922 and 1944, he spent over 2,000 days behind bars, yet each confinement only deepened his resolve. In the silence of his cell, Gandhi prayed, fasted, and wrote. His letters and journals from prison revealed a mind at peace, one that viewed imprisonment not as punishment, but as a test of truth and endurance. He said, "In a gentle way, you can shake the world." And behind bars, that gentleness grew sharper than any weapon. Even in chains, Gandhi led his followers through example. He refused special treatment, spun his own cloth, and lived as simply as he did outside. Jailers often found themselves moved by his humility and compassion. For Gandhi, suffering was a teacher. Each arrest was a lesson in patience and faith, a reminder that the path to freedom required sacrifice. While the British tried to break his body, they only strengthened his spirit. Inside those cold walls, Gandhi proved that true power lies not in authority or weapons, but in the unshakable strength of conscience.
By 1942, World War II had plunged the world into chaos, and India was still under British rule. Gandhi knew the moment had come for a final, decisive stand. At the All India Congress session in Bombay, he rose before a restless crowd and spoke the words that would ignite a revolution: "Do or die." The Quit India movement was born, not a plea, but a demand for complete and immediate independence. Gandhi urged every Indian to act with courage, but without hatred, to resist the British through nonviolent non-cooperation at every level of society. Factories stopped, railways were sabotaged, and British offices stood empty as people withdrew their labor and loyalty. The British struck back ruthlessly. Gandhi, along with thousands of leaders, was arrested within hours. Protests erupted nationwide, unarmed crowds facing bullets, jail, and death. Yet the call for freedom could no longer be silenced. Inside prison, Gandhi fasted for peace, even as his health declined. The movement was crushed militarily, but spiritually, India had already broken its chains. The British realized that their rule had lost legitimacy,
that the will of a united, awakened people could not be contained. The Quit India movement marked the final chapter in Gandhi's long struggle, the moment when India's destiny became unstoppable.
At the heart of Gandhi's life and struggle was Ahimsa, the principle of nonviolence. But for Gandhi, Ahimsa was not just the absence of violence, it was the active presence of love, compassion, and truth in every thought, word, and action. He believed that harming another being, even in thought, was a form of violence. To him, nonviolence was the highest expression of strength, not weakness. It required greater courage to forgive than to strike, to endure pain rather than inflict it. Gandhi said, "Nonviolence is the weapon of the strong." Ahimsa shaped every movement he led, from protests and marches to how he spoke to his enemies. He urged his followers never to act out of hatred, no matter how great the injustice. The goal was not to destroy the oppressor, but to transform him through truth and love. This philosophy extended to all living beings. Gandhi refused to harm animals, practiced vegetarianism, and believed that compassion began with small acts, feeding the hungry, helping the poor, healing divisions. Ahimsa was his spiritual foundation, his guiding law. It turned politics into a path of morality and faith, proving that peace could be mightier than any sword. Through Ahimsa, Gandhi showed the world that the greatest revolutions began not with violence, but with the awakening of the human conscience.
Mahatma Gandhi believed that true happiness and freedom came from living simply. He practiced what he preached, wearing plain, hand-spun clothes, eating modest meals, and living in small, humble surroundings. He gave up luxury and comfort, choosing instead a life of discipline and self-control. His diet was mostly fruits, vegetables, and goat's milk. Gandhi often fasted, not just for health or protest, but as a way to purify the body and mind. Every part of his day followed a routine of prayer, meditation, and service. He spun his own cloth on the charkha, spinning wheel, believing that honest labor connected people to truth and simplicity. For Gandhi, simplicity was strength. He showed that living with less made the mind clearer and the spirit freer. His life became a message that peace and truth are best found not in possessions, but in self-discipline, humility, and love for others.
As India neared independence, Mahatma Gandhi faced one of his greatest heartbreaks, the partition of India and Pakistan. Despite his tireless efforts to promote unity between Hindus and Muslims, political tensions and religious violence grew uncontrollable. Gandhi opposed the idea of dividing the nation along religious lines. He traveled from village to village, fasting and praying for peace, urging people to see one another as brothers, not enemies. But his voice of unity was often drowned out by hatred and fear. When partition became inevitable in 1947, Gandhi chose not to celebrate independence. Instead, he spent the day in silence and prayer, mourning the bloodshed that accompanied freedom. He walked among the riots in Bengal and Delhi, risking his life to stop the violence through his presence and compassion. Though he could not prevent partition, Gandhi's courage and moral strength reminded the world that true independence meant harmony, not division. His struggle for unity remains one of the most moving chapters of his life.
Mahatma Gandhi's influence extended beyond movements.
he shaped the very leaders who would guide India into the future. Among them, Jawaharlal Nehru stood out as his political heir, though their visions sometimes differed. Gandhi saw in Nehru a brilliant modern thinker, passionate about science, socialism, and progress, while Nehru admired Gandhi's spiritual strength and moral clarity. Their relationship was like that of a father and son, marked by both affection and respectful disagreement. Gandhi's guidance helped Nehru balance idealism with practicality, shaping him into India's first prime minister. Gandhi also mentored leaders like Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel, the Iron Man of India, whose discipline and determination complemented Gandhi's moral leadership. Even those who disagreed with him, such as Subhas Chandra Bose, deeply respected his integrity and influence. Through patience, empathy, and example, Gandhi molded a generation of freedom fighters, teaching them that leadership was not about power, but about service, sacrifice, and truth.
Despite his global image as a symbol of peace and justice, Mahatma Gandhi was not free from criticism and controversy. His methods, beliefs, and decisions sparked debate, both during his lifetime and long after his death. Some critics argued that his strategy of nonviolence was too slow or idealistic in the face of oppression, believing that freedom required more direct confrontation. Leaders like Subhas Chandra Bose felt that armed struggle was necessary against British rule, while others thought Gandhi's compromises weakened the independence movement. His views on race during his early years in South Africa have also been questioned. Early writings showed prejudice toward Africans, though his perspective evolved over time toward universal equality. Gandhi's personal experiments with celibacy, strict dietary rules, and unconventional spiritual practices drew moral and social criticism, even from his followers. Additionally, his stance during Partition, insisting on peace and unity, angered extremists on both sides of the Hindu-Muslim divide. Yet, even amid controversy, Gandhi remained steadfast in his truth, accepting criticism as part of his journey. His life continues to spark discussion, reminding the world that great leaders are also complex human beings.
On January 30, 1948, the world stood still as Mahatma Gandhi, the apostle of peace and nonviolence, was assassinated in New Delhi. At 78 years old, Gandhi was walking to his evening prayer meeting at Birla House, surrounded by followers, when Nathuram Godse, a Hindu extremist, approached him and fired 3 bullets at point-blank range. Gandhi fell, uttering his final words, "Hey Ram," a prayer to God. His death sent shockwaves through India and the world. The man who had led millions to freedom without lifting a weapon had fallen to violence. For days, the nation mourned deeply. Millions joined his funeral procession, walking barefoot behind his body as it was carried to the banks of the Yamuna River for cremation. His ashes were later scattered in sacred rivers across India. Gandhi's assassination was not just the death of a leader, it was the loss of a moral compass. Yet his legacy lived on, inspiring movements for peace and justice across the globe, from Martin Luther King Jr. in America to Nelson Mandela in South Africa.
Mahatma Gandhi's influence extended far beyond India's borders. His philosophy of nonviolent resistance reshaped global struggles for justice, equality, and freedom. In the United States, Martin Luther King Jr. studied Gandhi's teachings and adopted nonviolence as the core of the civil rights movement, using love and peaceful protest to confront racial injustice. In South Africa, Nelson Mandela drew upon Gandhi's principles of peaceful defiance during the long fight against apartheid, blending courage with compassion. Across Asia and Africa, Emerging nations found in Gandhi a blueprint for liberation, proving that moral strength could challenge empires. Leaders like Aung San Suu Kyi in Myanmar and Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana looked to him as a symbol of resistance with dignity. Even in the West, his message resonated with peace activists, environmentalists, and human rights defenders who believed that change begins with conscience. Through his ideals of truth, Satya, and nonviolence, Ahimsa, Gandhi became not just the father of India, but a teacher to humanity, proving that true power lies not in force, but in the strength of the soul.
In modern India, Mahatma Gandhi's legacy continues to shape the nation's conscience, though often debated and reinterpreted. His image adorns the Indian rupee, his birthday is celebrated as Gandhi Jayanti, and his philosophy of nonviolence and truth remains central to India's moral identity. Politicians across parties invoke his name, though not always his principles. His ideas of self-reliance, Swadeshi, echo in movements promoting local industry, sustainability, and simplicity. His dream of village empowerment still inspires social reformers and rural development projects. Yet modern India also struggles with challenges Gandhi warned against: violence, corruption, inequality, and materialism. Many question whether the nation has stayed true to his ideals or merely honors his memory in words. Despite these contradictions, Gandhi's spirit endures. In schools teaching peace, in grassroots activists fighting injustice, and in citizens striving for unity amid diversity. His legacy is not a relic of the past, it is a mirror to the present, reminding India of what it once fought for and what it must continue to become.
Truth never damages a cause that is just. An error does not become truth by reason of multiplied propagation, nor does truth become error because nobody sees it. An eye for an eye only ends up making the whole world blind. Nonviolence is the greatest force at the disposal of mankind. The best way to find yourself is to lose yourself in the service of others. You must not lose faith in humanity. Humanity is an ocean. If a few drops of the ocean are dirty, the ocean does not become dirty. Be the change that you wish to see in the world. The future depends on what you do today. Live simply so that others may simply live. The difference between what we do and what we are capable of doing would suffice to solve most of the world's problems. Freedom is not worth having if it does not include the freedom to make mistakes. In a gentle way, you can shake the world.